Today, we're going to talk about how to get the results you want in any conversation. Who am I, first of all? I'm Masha. I'm a mediator, a facilitator. I'm a conflict and growth coach. I've spent 20 years in tech, including leadership roles at companies such as Google and Intuit. I'm a Harvard certified, ICF certified, and Martha Beck certified Wayfinder coach. I have a master's in negotiation and conflict resolution, and I have been a team facilitator and coach for over 10 years. I specialize helping high-performing teams and people turn reactivity into collaboration. Here's what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about conflict defaults and which of them show up for you and when. We are going to discuss what positions are versus interests and why it's important. We are going to cover some techniques for how to show up in conversations and get the result that you want. We are going to touch on BATNA and WATNA and how to use them in your day-to-day life and work, and how to say no without damaging any relationship. And then, of course, we will do some practices. So, for conflict defaults, these are all trauma survival responses. And how they form is when we are a small child and something scary happens to us. What are we able to do to feel more or less okay? Sometimes we can fight, sometimes we flight, as in escape. Sometimes we freeze and hide under the blanket, or just hide emotionally and freeze and blankly stare at someone who is being scary. And other times we fawn, and fawning means keeping the peace at any cost, people pleasing, over accommodating, and overly trying too hard to keep the peace no matter what, because because our survival depends on it. And the more we repeat this response in situations that are scary for us, the more it takes shape in our mind, and the neural pathway gets reinforced every time we repeat this. Eventually, it becomes automatic for us. Let's say there's an unsafe adult in our surrounding. Maybe it's a daycare teacher, maybe it's someone from the family, and they yell. And when they yell, we tried fighting, that led to worse consequences. We tried running, but they caught us. So we tried freezing, and they just yelled for a bit and then they stopped yelling. So that was the response that actually got us the best result. So that's what we do from that moment on. Whenever that adult is in the proximity, we freeze to avoid getting into more trouble than what we already are in. So take 3 minutes and do this reflection to discover what your default conflict pattern is. Think of a recent situation where you said yes, or maybe you escalated when in reality you actually wanted to do something else, like say no or disagree. What showed up for you? Did you fight? Did you fight as in disagree openly and verbally, became assertive and explained yourself and tried to prove your point? Did you flee? Did you say like, "Oh, gotta go, sorry, our meeting just ran out of time"? Or maybe you froze and just blankly stared at the person or nodded and said nothing? Or did you fawn, meaning you agreed to them and just stayed with it, with their idea and did whatever they asked you to, even though it was against what you wanted? What was it that triggered your response? What do you think could have happened if you didn't respond that way? What were you scared of? And this is an important one because we are not really scared of this other person usually in that situation. We are scared of something that has really scared us in the past. So really sit with this one. Take your time. Hit pause if you need to. And remember what was the really scary thing that happened when you disagreed with someone or didn't do something that they wanted you to. Remember how this kind of response helped you stay safe or comfortable in the past. Maybe think about daycare. Like for me, I remember in my daycare, there was a teacher who got really upset whenever the kids weren't behaving the way that they were supposed to. And she would yell and scream and she would shake her hand in the air and just kind of like became big and scary. And I hid. It was during the nap time, and I literally hid under the blanket. And that was my response in conflict for the longest time until I did a lot of therapy and coaching and studied conflict. But what was it for you that happened in the past? What was it that happened where you actually stayed safe as a result of your response? All right, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about positions versus interests. Positions are what people say they want, and interests is what they actually need or why they want it. So a position could sound like, I need this done by Friday if you're at work, or I want a new phone if, you're talking to your teenager. But the interest behind it could be a deadline from a VP, or maybe they're afraid of failure, or maybe it's important for them because somebody who matters asked for their help with this and they're trying to get all the resources they need. Or with the phone, the interest or the need behind it could be they want to be able to stay in touch with their friends, or everybody in their class has a phone and they don't, and they feel like an outsider. People argue over positions but negotiate over interests, said William Ury. And the same interest can actually be satisfied different ways. That's where the new solutions live. Because positions are so rigid, they just come across as this one thing and the only way to move forward. I need this done by Friday is a very strict position. There's no room, no flexibility in how to interpret this. But if what's really happening is they're worried about the relationship with their VP, you could ask questions and find out, is there something that they could be doing, something different than having this rigid deadline with your team that would actually help fuel the relationship with that VP? It's important. So, you can call a friend or you can do it on your own and practice, but it's really better with another person. How to get to interest from positions. So here's the situation. Somebody comes to you and they say, we need your full team support on this launch with no exceptions. What do you think could be driving this demand? Think of three options. And then if you are practicing with somebody else, ask them open-ended questions to find out what's actually behind it. What are the needs and what are the interests? Maybe you can ask them, why is this important to have the full team support on this launch? What would happen if there would be no team support from us on this launch or partial team support? Why did you say no exceptions? How is that important? What is driving this ask? And so on. So practice with a friend or on your own. Think of a few questions and find out what the interests are of this person asking or what they could be. And then if you're practicing with somebody else, switch roles and do the same thing again. Maybe think of a different situation as an example. Maybe instead of we need your full team support in this launch, no exceptions, maybe the situation is someone comes to you and says, you need to go with me to a picnic on Sunday, and please don't say no. I will not accept that as an answer. Think of that. Practice with that. And then once you're done practicing this, Notice what questions opened something up and allowed you to get deeper into understanding of the underlying interests that are behind these positions. Chris Voss is a wonderful negotiator. If you haven't read any of his works, I highly recommend them. And he developed these three techniques that I find very helpful in most conversations. The first is mirroring. And what you do is when you talk to someone, you repeat the last two or three words that they said as a question. Let's say, they say, I need you to come to the picnic with me on Sunday. The picnic on Sunday? Yes, I need you to come to the picnic with me that my mom is hosting. Your mom is hosting. Yes, my mom. Can you come? Can I come? And then you kind of think about it. So, the way it works and why it works is because it signals that you are listening and it leads them on to continue talking. So, they reveal more information. So, the first sentence you heard is, hey, come to the picnic with me on Sunday. That's all you know. But then as you mirrored, potentially you hear that it's the mom who's hosting, and it's important for them clearly that you come. Second one is labeling. So somebody says something and you notice what's going on with them at the moment. So let's continue this picnic example. Can you come to the picnic with me on Sunday? It's really important. If you label, you say, it seems like it's very important for you that I come with you. And why this works is it provides acknowledgement rather than pushing back in the same moment. So it diffuses the pressure without really conceding your positions at this point. And then the third technique is called calibrated questions. And you ask how and what type of questions which shifts the problem back to them. So they say, can you come to the picnic with me on Sunday? And you can ask, how should I handle my existing plans to make that work? Or what would you do if you were me, but you could make it? And then they start thinking like, really interesting question. What would I do? I would probably say no. And then when you say no, it's going to be easier for them to comprehend. So let's practice this one and ideally call a friend, or if you have somebody near you, then practice with them. But this is how it's going to happen. Here's the scenario. This has to happen. I already told my VP your team is handling it. We have to have it done by the 10th. This is a very high priority. And then you do mirroring as round two for a couple of minutes by repeating the last two to three words of each sentence. Then sorry, that was round one. In round two, you do labeling and calibrated question. You name what you're noticing is going on with them and then ask how you're supposed to make it work or what you should deprioritize. And then for round three, you switch roles and you practice again from the top, but now you are playing the opposite roles that you just did with your partner. Okay? So if you're mirroring, this would be like one person says, this has to happen. The other person says, this has to happen? Yes, I already told my VP your team is handling it. My team is handling it? And of course, there are different ways to mirror. You can say, like, my team is handling it. That might come off a little bit too aggressively, but like, my team is handling it. We have to have it done by the 10th. By the 10th? Yes, by the 10th. And then they may go into explaining why it is the 10th and what's behind the deadline. This is a very high priority. A very high priority. Yes, it is a high priority because it's on top of the list for our CEO, or, could be something else. And if you're labeling and calibrated using calibrated questions, then you can say, when you hear this, I see how important this is to you. How do you think I could make it work? Or how am I supposed to make it work? What should my team deprioritize to make it work? That opens up the discussion even further. Once you've done this practice with your friend, notice what has shifted. What felt uncomfortable? Where did you cave or push back really hard? Now, let's talk about alternatives. BATNA and WATNA are best alternative to negotiated agreement and the worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. And what this means is what would be the best scenario in case your negotiation fails? And what would be the worst case scenario if you were not able to reach a deal? Knowing this gives you a lot of power. If you know what your best alternative to negotiate agreement is, you will be able to negotiate from the place of strength rather than the place of fear. And if you know what the other sides, BATNA and WATNA, are, that gives you even more negotiating power. You can use that to your advantage in negotiation if you know that, let's say, if you don't reach an agreement, they fail, their team fails, or their family's in trouble, or whatever it is. That's the worst case scenario. Or if you know their best case scenario, you know what you need to offer them to beat their best case agreement. Best alternative, sorry, to the agreement. So if you think of an upcoming situation where you might need to push back on something, what would be your best alternative to a negotiated agreement? What would be the best case scenario if negotiation failed? Maybe you get what you want anyways. Maybe you get some of it, and that's okay. And what would be the worst alternative? Like you get nothing, or you have to do the work that you didn't agree to, or that you didn't include in your planning. It's important to know this. So how do you actually respond to something when you actually can't say yes? Just that's it, when you can't agree. Not necessarily a conflict, just any situation where somebody is asking you to do something that you can't. There are three steps to this, to the art of saying no to a tough ask. First, you say yes to your own priorities and interests. Then you say no to their specific request. And then you offer an alternative or propose a path forward that would actually work for you. For example, somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you include this feature into our Q3, please? You say, our Q3 roadmap is locked and I am accountable to that. So you state your own priorities and interests, right? This is your priority. Your roadmap is locked and you're accountable. I cannot absorb this project as scoped. So you say, sorry, but no, I cannot do this right now. I cannot absorb this project as scoped. But then you don't stop there. You propose an alternative. What if we identify the two highest value pieces and I scope the contribution around those? Or it could be, what if we pushed it into Q4? What would be the implications for you of that? And then wait to see their answer. Now, let's practice this. Let's say senior partner already told their VP that your team is handling a project that you actually can't take on and didn't commit to. What in that case would this look like? Yes to what? What can't you do? And what are you able to offer instead as an alternative? So if you're practicing with a partner, great. If not, just do it on your own on a piece of paper and then practice it out loud. Make sure that it's following that structure of here's what I can do around your own priorities, right? Like my team is at full capacity right now and I'm on point for that, let's say. I cannot take on this additional project right now. However, I would be able to take it on in 3 weeks. That's the note in the proposal. Or I cannot take on an additional project right now with my current capacity, but I would be able to if you assign two engineers in addition to what I already have on my team. Or I cannot handle this project the way that it is scoped right now. However, I would be able to handle it if we deprioritized the other three tasks that I have on my list right now and work with that. And then you can switch and practice again and debrief. Did it actually sound like a no or a maybe, or what was it like for you on either side? All right, so this is a longer practice exercise that you can again do in pairs or not. You can try to do it on your own. Here's a situation for you, and you can respond however it feels natural. Hold on, let me close the window. Okay. Um, yeah. So you lead a team with a locked Q3 roadmap, and a director comes over who is 2 levels above you and says, I've already committed to the CPO that your team will own the data pipeline for a new product. It launches in 6 weeks. This is the priority now. Isn't this exciting? Has anything similar happened to anyone before? So again, in round one, you respond the way you normally would before you heard this presentation today. Notice what feels most natural for you. Like for me, as I think of this scenario, I feel, oh my God, well, I have to agree to this. And well, first I'm gonna freeze, but then I'm gonna fawn. So I'm gonna freeze like a deer in the headlight, and then I'm gonna agree to this and say, yeah, yeah, of course, we got it. And then I'll figure out, what will actually happen. And then in the next round, try to do this while applying the tools that you learn. Maybe it's a combination of the three techniques, the mirroring, the reframes, or the questions. Maybe think about what your options are for BATNA and WATNA, or respond in the 3 steps we discussed. The yes for you, the no for you, and the alternative proposal. So you practice this and then switch sides and practice it again. Now you will be responding, and your partner will be asking the questions. All right. Notice what has moved and what was still hard for you. Notice how you might try this. Okay. Which default showed up? Which of the tools was the easiest for you to use? Was there a question or phrase that opened something that would not have opened otherwise? And what did you learn about your own pattern from this reflection and the exercise at the start of it? Throughout all these tools, what can help is first regulating yourself, because when we are faced with a tough question or a situation or a rigid ask, it's really challenging sometimes to even grab for those tools that you just learned, because we're activated and we're responding from this flight or fight agitated state. So before you respond, here's what you can try. This is my own method that I developed. It's called Exhale, Explore, Engage, and it consists of the 3 steps. The first step is to exhale. You take 1 or 2 or 3 or however many exhales that you need. This long exhale that is longer than the inhale regulates your nervous system to the place of feeling okay, more okay than when you were a second ago, a second before you took this exhale. Oh, this gives you enough space to pause, to actually then go further into exploring what's happening with you. Explore what the urge is, like, oh, my urge is to hide, or my urge is to agree, or my urge is to escalate. But what's behind this urge? What are the needs? What are my real needs? Like, why do I want to do that? Because I'm scared. Scared of what? Because I'm scared that if I don't agree, I'm gonna get fired. Well, that's important to name, right? And then when you've named that, you engage with intention rather than from this responsive reactive state. You choose the tool that you want to try here once you've regulated with the exhale and explored and found your need. What would be the best way to get that need met? Like if it's the fear of being fired that's behind the urge and you wanting to hide, would responding that way actually prevent you from getting fired, or would it some sort of collaboration or proposal be that much more helpful in that case? Think of that and then engage from that place of calm, thinking what will get you closest to what you want, the need being met. Maybe think of the opposite. That's the easiest way I describe it. So the urge is to hide. What would be the opposite? To show up. Okay, how do I show up? I show up by saying, here's what my priorities are this quarter. And no, I cannot take it on right now the way that it's described. However, I would be willing to do that if I had additional resources. Or, however, I could do it the next quarter. Or, however, I know someone who can help you with this right now. And that's going to get you to a much, much, much better outcome. So, what will you try this week? What will you try before your next cross-functional ask? Maybe write down your BATNA and your WATNA before you walk into that conversation. Or what will you do when fight or flight or fawn reactions show up? Will you take an exhale? Will you ask a calibrated question before responding, like, how do you envision me do this? Or will you propose something else? And if you're freezing, I love using mirroring. When they say something, you just repeat back, which whatever they said, the last couple of words as a question, which prompts them to tell you more and to explain themselves. And it keeps the conversation moving. So, which of these tools will you try this week? Thank you so much for listening and for participating. If you did, if you weren't able to participate today, maybe you can do it on your own time. But please stay connected with me through my website, or if you'd like to send me an email, there you go. Or follow me on Instagram, where I share tips and tricks for managing disagreements and conflicts. I am Masha Rosanov, and I look forward to seeing you next time.